welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, well, we'll bring you a two-part show, all politics, which is our normal want. First up tonight, the state of education in Boston, of course, and across the state. Education will be a central issue in the upcoming mayoral debate. And tonight, we'll get a glimpse of the future of education with who better than the new Secretary of the Executive Office of Education. Governor Deval Patrick's appointment, Matt Malone, joins us. Then in the second half, we'll shift gears and joining us an old friend, a former colleague of Mayor Menino. He's now a vice president for external affairs at Suffolk University. John Nucci joins us, and we'll talk about the upcoming mayor's race and about the mayor's dramatic decision and his announcement this past week. All that and more tonight on Talk of the Neighborhoods. Stay tuned. All right, we're back with Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Tonight, a two-part show, and in this first half, I'm pleased to have joining me the new Secretary of the Executive Office of Education for the Commonwealth of Mass. He is a former superintendent in Brockton with lots of experience in the urban environment, now taking over the leadership reins at the Executive Office. Pleased to have joining us Matt Malone. And Matt, thanks so much for coming by and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Well, education has been so much in the news here in Boston in the last weeks and months, really the last year, as the city has gone through this whole process for school choice, school assignment, and now with Mayor Menino's dramatic announcement that he will not be running for re-election. Well, John Connolly, one of the opponents, was already making it an issue, but it's likely to become even more of one now. You've worked in an urban system and in several different cities and towns, and I wonder if you share with us your perspective on how you see Boston doing, because lots of times it comes in for criticism. Of course, we have some highs with the Latin school, the exam schools, and some schools that are underperforming dramatically. But in general, how do you see Boston doing?
So, I started my career with Mayor Menino. I started out as a substitute and then a paraprofessional at the King Middle School in 1993.
Right here in the city of Boston.
Right here in the city of Boston, out in Grove Hall, up on Lawrence Ave. I can't tell you how positive I feel about the growth in the last 20 years in the schools. Yes, there's still room for improvement, but look at where we were and how much the system has improved over the last 20 years under the mayor's leadership. You got to give Mayor Menino a lot of credit. He is the urban mechanic. He's made some great hires in leadership positions. He's helped improve the system. He's pushed through tremendous amount of reform, and they got the results to show that it's worked. I mean, look at the Boston Public Schools was the highest achieving urban district in the country a couple years ago, and they won the Broad Prize. So I think that overall, on face value, the Boston Public Schools, greatest urban system in the country, has done some great work. There are areas where I think that we could drill down and do a better job, but I give credit where credit is due. The team that's built from leadership down through the teachers in the system have made tremendous progress focusing on literacy and numeracy over the last 20 years. You can look at the political capital that's been built and the currency with the parents that they basically voted on changing the assignment system and accomplished that, which folks thought would be impossible to do. And I think great things will be on the horizon for the Boston Public Schools. One of the things that I've learned as a parent, and I forgot to say,
and you live in the city.
I live in Rosendale,
yeah.
and I worked in the Boston Public Schools for 10 years as a paraprofessional teacher at the Burke High School, and then I was a principal at Monument High School in South Boston. As a parent now of a fourth grader and a first grader at the Linden Elementary School in West Roxbury, I can tell you the value in something that Boston is really the sharp edge of the sword. is around K-1, so full day for 4-year-olds. As part of the governor's proposal right now to invest in education, he has included an opportunity for all systems across the Commonwealth to invest in a K-1 model just like the Boston one. Boston's the only system in the Commonwealth that's doing this and doing it very well. I can attest as a parent, this is how we get at literacy and numeracy and close gaps by investing in our 4-year-olds, and I think Boston has taught us a lot of lessons in that regard.
And I want to talk more with you about the governor's education plan as well, but I want to go back to the city here because so much of the debate that took place here, and perhaps going forward it may be as well, is around this whole concept of quality schools and where they're located, of course. That was the big part of the whole school choice, school assignment plan. But you see schools, and you are seeing schools now all across the Commonwealth. Is that so, or how difficult is it to kind of define what quality schools is anymore?
Well, I think you need to look at a set of metrics, and it's really around student achievement results. I mean, we're a results-based industry. So if you focus on, let's say, literacy and numeracy results across a grade span, you can identify what some would say are quality schools. But that's really just one piece of it. The other piece of it is, how are they investing in the arts and enrichment and athletics and phys ed? Those are all indicators of quality schools, plus things like safety, parent satisfaction, retention rates, how well the school does in actually addressing parental concerns. I mean, these are all items and areas that we can identify and measure in a quality system. I think that no matter what neighborhood you live in the city, everyone should have a right to a high quality free public education. It's what the foundation of our democracy is based on. I think no matter what neighborhood I visit, not only in the city but across the Commonwealth, I'm finding high quality schools in many places that some folks will say, well, that's not what I would consider high quality. But they say, have you actually visited? Have you looked at the school? Have you sat in the classrooms? Have you talked with the people who work there and the parents who send their children and entrust them to that school?
And sometimes find schools that aren't performing in places that you might not expect as well.
So here's my take. I mean, we need to look at schools as a system, support them around development of best practices, replicate where we're getting great results. You know, I visited a charter school in South Boston today, Up Academy. It's getting great results in math and English, highest growth scores in the Commonwealth. And Boston, rightly so, is saying, well, how can we take those practices and replicate them in other schools? I think that the good people in the city of Boston, the good people in leadership positions, want results for kids. They want young people to feel respected and valued and nurtured, but also held to very rigorous standards. When we know the game is no longer graduating from high school, the game is graduating from college. So how do we get folks there? I think it's Boston is going to continue to improve around investing in early childhood, about really extending the learning time in the middle levels, and then about really increasing the rigor at the high school level so that we put more folks into college.
And as far as charters go, and I don't know if that academy is that an in-district charter,
or is that
an
in-district charter?
Because, well, there's criticism and praise for charters. Most of the criticism comes from drawing away resources more than anything. But what do you see as the future of charters? Is that the way to go?
So great question. I think the charter schools are a tool in our toolbox. They're not the only tool, but they are a tool and they have a purpose and a place. I like when I see, for example, charters coming in and helping schools through turnaround, like I saw this morning at Up Academy. I then went to Chelsea and saw a charter school that actually serves a large percentage of Boston kids as well. It's a school that re-engages students who have dropped out, Phoenix Academy. What a great novel design, and they're doing great work, and they're taking folks who have dropped out of school and putting them into advanced place coursework. So that kind of thing I think is very exciting. I think those charters definitely have a place in our larger theory of action. I also do get, as a former superintendent, the negative side of folks saying, well, I don't want any charters, and I think every one of these should be viewed on as an individual merit, and we should approve or disapprove of a charter based on whether or not the proposal makes sense for the local community and if it's going to be better than the product that already exists. So I think that, you know, sometimes I run into some folks in the charter world, that's all they want to hear is charter. Some folks on the public school side, they don't even want to talk charter. I think there's some room for compromise and collaboration. And I also think that, you know, our unions, our teacher unions, you know, have a seat at that table as well. So I'm excited about what I've learned so far in my 11 weeks on this job, is that I think there's open discourse for collaboration, for discussion, for finding ways to replicate best practices and to do really good work in schools. I don't mean to cut you off, but I visited a school the other day in Worcester the other day, a vocational high school, Worcester Tech. And I saw things happening in Worcester Tech that I say, wow, if we were doing things like that in Boston, if we were doing things like that in Brockton, if we were doing things like that when I was in Swampscott, we would be a much better system overall because it meets a young person's needs, not for all kids, but for a large majority of kids. And if we can help any kids, it doesn't matter what the model is. It's the freedom and flexibilities and the cool ideas that engage kids that will make schools better.
Now, I know the cap on charters is, I believe, legislatively mandated.
That is legislatively mandated.
But the secretary has a major role, as I recall, in terms of recommendations and et cetera, et cetera. Are you recommending some expansion of charters?
I serve on the Board of Education, so I vote charters up or down. I consider myself the Scott Brown of charter votes. I voted against some, and I voted for some. I think, again, I'm going to always vote on what I think is the right thing to do, and it's going to be based on merits of the actual proposal. If folks that know, I got a lot of publicity when I was superintendent of Brockton, and I was against the charter proposal in Brockton. I didn't think the proposal was well done. I didn't think it offered anything that was better than what we were doing, and that proposal was not brought forward by the board, by the commissioner of the board. But I think overall, charters have a place, and I'm looking forward to continuing to have a discussion with the folks in the charter operators of the world who are good people. They care about kids. But as I said, I think that there's multiple ways to the promised land, and it's got to be a combination of charters, district, even partnership with some privates. There's a way to do this to get all kids into college.
And there's not just one way.
There's not just one way.
Again, Matt Malone is the secretary of the Executive Office of Education. Just 10 weeks on the job after having left as the superintendent of the Brockton Public Schools. Lives here in the city of Boston. Here tonight on Talk of the Neighborhoods. We've got a few minutes left with him. In many ways, if I recall correctly, the executive secretary gives you kind of a bully pulpit to really kind of put forth ideas. You know, there's several different levels, Department of Elementary, Secondary Education, and that handle different aspects, higher ed, this, that. But you're the guy that goes out there and kind of pulls all these ideas together and champions them. What's you talked a little bit earlier about K-1 and the importance of that. I know the governor has put forth recommendation around education, and how do you see that faring? Because it's tied to some revenue as well.
It's tied to revenue. So the governor's put forward a bold budget request, House 1, around transportation and education, about $1.9 billion investment. It's about equally divided between transportation and education. And my job as secretary is to really work across the administration, representing early childhood, K-12, and higher ed, for how we can talk in ways with our elected officials and folks in the field and advocates about what this investment in education will mean. And we've been able to really get a good, strong showing of support on the field for investment in early childhood, investment in K-12, and investment in higher ed around affordability. We've been able to change some people's opinions about why we need to find a way to fund the governor's proposal, because we think that this investment now will close gaps and increase opportunities for the future of our country. my parents and your parents, they came home from World War II and they invested in infrastructure. They grew the economy. They built the schools that you and I went to. This is now our generational responsibility to not only our kids, but our children's children in terms of that same similar investment in both transportation and education. I think that the governor's proposal will help Boston not only with the work around early childhood, but really with the work of extending time and about making college affordable. I think it will do a lot to help us align our vocational high schools and our community colleges in a way that makes for a seamless, stackable college cluster portfolio that will get to a 4-year degree at some point. I'm very excited. The governor has been bold enough to call out this strategy and been very crystal clear to say the investment now is worth it for our kids. Because tell me, which 4-year-old are you not going to invest in? Which one? Point them out. And that's how personal we've been in this conversation.
Is there a risk in it coming so soon after? Well, looks like we're starting to dig ourselves out of this, economic hole here. But is there a risk in putting that forth now instead of waiting until things?
Great question. So history has shown that coming out of a recession, investments, even after the Great Depression, investments in infrastructure and education will continue to grow the economy. Massachusetts is coming out of this recession faster than any other state in the union. Boston, you know this because you drive around the city, we have more cranes than we do pigeons right now. All right? So think about the investment in education will continue to grow this economy. We're a knowledge-based economy. We're an innovation economy. Our greatest resources are our young people. It's the brain power of this state. We'll continue to grow this economy through this investment. I think that there's, with risk, of course, comes reward. Sometimes folks get mad at me and they say, I don't want to spend any more money on other people's children, or I don't want to invest. And I say, hey, the price of living in a democracy is veteran cemeteries and taxes. And have been a former Marine who fought in the First Persian Gulf War and now someone who pays my taxes. I understand what that means. I take it very personal. And I think that this investment now by this governor, this administration, will help us become not only leading the country, but quite frankly, at some point, Massachusetts, we're doing so well, we may be leading the world in terms of student achievement. So I'm very excited about it.
Of course, talking of democracy here in Massachusetts, especially, legislature holds almost equal power with the governor. How will it fare up there, and how are you doing convincing lawmakers?
Great question. So I've literally been traveling the state, meeting with as many representatives and senators that I can meet with, talking about the proposal. I either meet with them at the State House or I'll travel to their towns and communities, and we'll do visits together. There's good people up on the Hill who have a hard decision to make. But what I'm encouraged about is that they're having a discussion. They're having a dialogue about what an investment would mean and what is the architecture of what that investment would actually look like in terms of some sort of package. The governor put forward his package, but he said clearly there's more than one way to do this. So I'm excited about the people that we've met with, both the leadership and the members and the membership are talking about this. I haven't really received anything negative other than folks say, well, you want too much at once. But folks are all willing to talk about there's got to be something. So I'm encouraged. We've asked for $1.9 billion, and I'm encouraged that the good people will find a way to make that a reality.
We've got just a couple minutes left. I've got to ask you, No Child Left Behind. Gone now, but there is a plan from the feds supposedly to kind of take the place of this. But are we losing anything by the waiver? I guess it's a waiver.
Right. So we have a waiver around No Child Left Behind in Massachusetts through the Race to the Top project, if you will. We think that the architecture, the bones of the original law allow us to continue to do this work around accountability, around the work of measurement, the work of developing assessments, aligning Common Core across the country. We think that adding the meat on the bones, if you will, of this original law through through the current administration with Secretary Duncan and of course President Obama, that we think that there's hope that there'll be some sort of reauthorization of something in the near future. And until that time comes, we can continue to work within the parameters of this waiver, which I think, and I'm very encouraged, is going to continue to get us results.
But no weakening of MCAS standards, no...
Oh, look, the new Common Core that Massachusetts has adopted is as rigorous, if not more rigorous, than the Massachusetts frameworks. The new assessments that we'll be rolling out, the Park assessment that will replace MCAS, it's really about college readiness, and it will be a whole new way of assessing whether or not our graduates are ready for the rigors of college and career. So I think that, you know, we're not stepping back. You know, we're going to keep moving forward and keep raising that bar. Our kids can, and we're going to keep holding them to a high level.
And finally, of course, just this past week, a report came out on Roxbury Community College, and being in the heart of the city and serving a lot of people, a very diverse student body. It's come in for a lot of criticism, and of course the president left, and the chairman of the board left. The whole Governor Patrick appointed an entire new board. Have they turned the corner, and what can we expect from Roxbury Community?
So I think that the board is taking the lead in really being transparent and addressing what the commission releases a set of findings on some behaviors that we're not going to tolerate and we won't accept. I think that Roxbury Community College is really at a place to continue to grow, to break down barriers and misconceptions of who they are and what they're all about. I think it's an exciting time for Roxbury Community College. I give a lot of credit to the board, to the governor and his administration for taking this issue on. I've been on this job 11 weeks. I've been able to meet firsthand some of the folks who are working there. I think they're good people, and I think, as we'll see, you look at where they are. You mentioned the heart of the city. So you think about the region and what the natural resources right in that section of the city are around healthcare, around manufacturing, around STEM fields. We got a great opportunity in the midst of our city. I think Roxbury Community College is going to be a school on the rise, and I think that this administration will be able, 5 years from now, say, look at what we did over there and took advantage of.
So people shouldn't give up on it.
I don't think people should give up on Roxbury College at all. This is, you know, look, we got some bad news. We've addressed it. We've taken this issue head on. We have not hid from some findings of the report. And this administration, both at the state level and the city level, are going to work together for some great things that come out of Dudley Square and Roxbury area.
Yeah. Again, Matt Malone, he's the new secretary of the Executive Office of Education, a gubernatorial appointment, and a City of Boston resident with two children in the schools, and a former superintendent in Brockton. Got your hands full, my friend, but I think you're up to the task. And
we're up to it, and you know, it's for people like you who care about this work that we're going to continue to drive hard, and hopefully we can continue to get people support to believe in free public education and help us.
That's where it starts. Again, Matt Malone. When we come back with more of Talking to the Neighborhoods, well, we'll shift gears a bit back to electoral politics. Well, get perhaps a glimpse of the thinking behind Mayor Menino's dramatic decision last week to hang him up. Well, he'll be in office till the end of this year, but he will not be running for re-election to the mayor's office. Joining us, an old friend of his, a former colleague from the Boston City Council, John Nucci. In the second half, catching up with an old friend, a familiar face, an old friend as well of Mayor Tom Menino, who just this past week made a dramatic announcement that he will not seek re-election to a record 6th term. Of course, that set off shockwaves and reverberations across the city, especially in political circles. And the scamper is on for all those people now thinking about running for mayor. And who better to join me than a guy who's firmly grounded in Boston politics, and of course once served with Mayor Menino on the Boston City Council, also on the school committee from East Boston. He's now Vice President for External Affairs, Suffolk University. John Nucci. Nice to have you here, John.
Great to be here, Joe.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Sure, of course.
Well, you know, this has been talked about for, well, 20 years.
Yeah.
Will he, won't he? He actually decided not to. Were you as shocked as some people were that he...
Yes, I was surprised. You know, I know he was going through his own personal thought process, and I know he had been thinking about it and taking the decision very, very seriously. I think that he understood a couple of things. He understood that he had some health issues, obviously. Everybody knows that. He also understood that his favorability was very high, that people really, really approved of the job he was doing.
70-some%.
I mean, you know, I think he was around 75% when he was elected 20 years ago, and he's still at that number, which is unheard of in politics. And I think polls were showing he would win. So I think sort of mentally he sort of came to peace with the fact that he had high approval ratings. The people of Boston, he was really beloved at this point by the people of Boston. He would have won. Then he could focus on his health and whether or not he was able to do that job and keep that schedule the way he wanted to do it. He had a great line in his farewell address where he said he could keep a mayor's schedule, but not a Menino schedule. And you've been around and I've been around, and you know how Mayor Menino governed. He didn't govern by sitting in his office all day. He was out in the neighborhoods talking to people. Morning, noon, night, weekends, it didn't stop. And I think that at the end of the day, the mayor decided if I can't do it that way, which is his way, then maybe it's time to just sort of step aside and let someone else have a shot at it. So I think it was a grueling decision for him.
I was going to say that had to be.
Tough.
This is a guy, and he's also a little stubborn, as we know,
Yep.
and would want to give up, or or any idea that he was kind of being pushed out,
Right.
or just doesn't ring true with him, and it had to be difficult, and he kind of did it his way too, because I'm sure there were people pulling on him.
Yeah.
Different sides. Oh, there's all those people. Well, there's a lot of people that worked for him their entire lives up there, and afraid of what comes next.
Like anything else, there were people who had a stake in his staying there, no question about it. There were close friends who were concerned about his health and his well-being going into the next 4 years. I think he was getting conflicting advice from sort of both of those camps, if you will. But at the end of the day, it was up to him to sort it all out. And he really did. I heard, and he has said that he made this decision all by himself one night, sitting at the kitchen table. And I believe it. I believe it, because he listened and he thought and he struggled with it. And I think he is entirely at peace with the decision he made. I had a great conversation with him on the phone Friday. And I really got the sense that he feels as though he made the right decision for himself, for his family, for his grandchildren, and maybe for the city as well.
It's been nothing but accolades since then. Of course, as it sets in, too, then you start to get all these other emotions as well, and I'm sure he'll go through those as well. But
I suppose you get a little buyer's remorse after you make this decision, as you get towards closer and closer to the end of the term. But I don't think Mayor Menino's planning on going back to Chesterfield Street and sitting in his lounge chair for the rest of his life. He's going to be active. He'll wind up in some position somewhere where he has an opportunity to continue to contribute to the city. I don't think he's going very far away.
Well, there's not, although it depends upon where you go, different parts of the country, but he was all-consuming, all-controlling type mayor. There was a column the other day that said, well, Boston needs to turn the corner on that as well. And will we see another mayor like that? Will voters be looking for someone like that since he was so popular?
We don't get this very often in Boston. We don't get open seats for mayor very often in Boston. It's not something we do on a regular basis. But I think if you look at history, every time it does occur, it's a bit of a change election. I think this in particular is going to be a change election. not a repudiation of Mayor Menino and his service for the past 20 years, but just the sort of swing of that pendulum. If you recall, Kevin White brought a certain style and approach to the mayor's office, downtown development, business-oriented.
Right.
Ray Flynn came in and the pendulum quickly swung the other way. It was neighborhoods. It was more of a local type flavor to his administration. Tom Menino came in and it was more of a paying attention to the details, making sure the city ran and ran well, making sure the trains ran on time, making sure the garbage was picked up, making sure all those things, while at the same time having a vision for the city. And all you got to do is go down the Innovation District and go to other places around the city and you'll see what his vision was. Bringing us to today, I think it's a change. It's a different city. It's a younger city than it's ever been in its history. And that's going to show itself, I think, in this election. Not so much that the next mayor has to be young, per se, but I think generationally speaking, there's a whole new voice that's going to be heard in this election. Young people historically haven't voted in municipal
I was going to say,
they
maybe some of the most, well, except maybe in presidential elections,
Right.
but rather...
not municipal, not municipal. This one's going to be different. I think they are going to get engaged. All of the new technology involved with election now, all of the communication, the political communication is online. It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all of these kinds of things. Young people are able to tune into the political process now at the local level. I think they're doing that. I think they're going to be heard from. You know, this particular race is very quick. It's a very short race.
Right, short porch.
Not a lot of time for sort of retail politics. I don't think this race is going to be about who puts up the most house signs.
Shakes the most hands.
Shakes the most hands, has the most people standing at the Forest Hills Rotary. I don't think that's what this race
What does
is
it
all
turn
about.
on?
I think the race is going to turn on ideas. It's going to turn on who speaks about the new Boston, who's speaking to the people who are in the new Boston, younger people, more wealthy people, as well as an immigrant population. I think the whole issue of whether a minority is going to be the mayor of the city is going to be on the table and maybe a factor in this race. I think it's going to be a race where people are looking for new ideas and a whole new language, a whole new narrative about what's good for this city. You know, I don't think any longer in Boston you have to be somebody who has to stand up and say, I was raised here, I raised my kids here, my family was here. I'm not sure that counts right now as much as it used to, given the demographic of the city of Boston.
Well, John Connolly, of course, announced he was going to run regardless of whether the mayor ran or not. Is he at an advantage right now?
I think that's going to even itself out. You know, I think that once the mayor announced that he wasn't going to run, whatever advantage I think that John Connolly had starts to level. I mean, he's still a very strong candidate in this race. There's no question about it. He enjoyed a lot of very good name recognition while he was the only candidate in the race. And I haven't seen any polls, but I bet his name recognitions took a pretty big jump during that period. So that gives him an advantage going in. I think as the press and so forth starts to focus on the new arrivals to the race, that sort of levels out so the playing field becomes pretty more flat. I think we'll now have 2 weeks or so of new news of every time a new candidate gets in. And every time a new candidate gets in, right, every day, every day. So the news cycle is going to change now. You know, it's going to be all about who's getting into the race. And then you get into the dog days of summer, and we'll see, you know, you start to separate it all out.
Tough it out. And of course, for those who don't know, it's the top two finishers in the preliminary election in September go on. It becomes a different election then, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, totally different election. This is not going to be a general election or a final election in November like the last two. It's not going to be a final election with two candidates, one of whom you know is going to win. Right. You know, I think in the Menino-Flaherty race or in the Menino-Hennigan race, you know, everybody knew the mayor was going to win, so attention sort of got away from the race. This is going to be the opposite. You know, this is going to be two candidates. It's going to be a tongue war between those two candidates. They're going to be very closely seated in the final, and that's going to be really where the action is going to be.
Given the fact that, and you talked about how the city has changed, but now a majority of the people in the city of Boston are people of color.
Yeah.
Does that pretty much, in your mind, guarantee that in all likelihood one of those two will likely be a person of color?
That's the conventional thinking right now, I think, about the race. I think it depends on who that person is, number one, I think it depends on how many other minority candidates are in the race. If that vote is being carved up 4 or 5 different ways with 4 or 5 different candidates in the preliminary election, that may not be the case.
Right.
They may not
Everybody
be
gets,
Everybody
a
gets
sliver,
piece.
but not a big enough slice.
Not enough to get into the final. But if there's 1 or 2, and they're quality candidates, yeah, I think one of those 2 final seats could very well be a minority candidate.
Well, of course, and there's, every time you turn around, there is somebody new thinking about running, and not just people of color, people, all kinds of. What do you see as, most likely kind of some of the defining factors in the race? Is it money? Is it name recognition? Is it base? Or is there something intangible there that we just haven't quite been able to get our arms around because we just keep thinking about Mayor Menino all these years?
Right. Well, it's funny you should say that. I think it is money because it's such a sprint of an election.
So that will be an important factor.
Be a very important factor.
Right.
None of these candidates has very high name recognition going into this race.
None of them that I mentioned so
No,
far.
there's no real 800-pound gorilla in this race. They're all, relatively low name recognition, which means that money becomes important because money is how you will define yourself in this race. And I think that's what the race is going to be about, how each candidate defines himself or herself to the voter who doesn't know anything about
and what kind of
him or her.
resources they have
And to do that, you need resources. You don't need sign holders. You don't need necessarily boots on the ground in the traditional political way. But you do need money, and you do need TV, and you do need mail, and you do need advertising, and that's all going to be money. So I think, lots of races candidates get in, and they're already pretty well known. So it's a question of whose vision versus the other person's vision. This is a little bit different. Everybody's going to have to define themselves to the voter because the voter doesn't know these people. And that takes money. That takes money.
Well, and that raises an interesting point. Some have suggested most of the names mentioned are elected officials. They're either already city councilors, whether district or at large, or state rep or state senator. There's been a whole number, or a county official, as in the case of Dan Conley. Also, some suggestion, and very early on, I even before Mayor Menino made any kind of announcement, that perhaps, and it's time, or there might be a Bloomberg candidate, so to speak, which is, of course, for those who don't know, Mayor Michael Bloomberg from New York, a Medford native, incidentally, and just so happens to be a billionaire.
That's right.
And, was mayor of New York for 2 terms, I think it is now, and stepping down. But could we see something like that?
No question about it. I've often thought for quite a while that the next mayor of Boston, when Tom Menino finally decided not to run, was going to be somebody we never heard of. That happens these days. These types of races, these high-profile races in recent history, particularly in this area, have been won by unknown candidates who sort of drop in from the outside.
Like a Deval Patrick?
Deval Patrick, an Elizabeth Warren. Right. It's just the way it goes.
No one had heard of them before they
Nobody had heard of these people before the race started. And I do think that somewhere out there in the city of Boston right now, as you and I are talking, there's somebody looking at this race, and we probably don't even know the person's name. A business person, somebody with a big checkbook who wants to drop into this race and try to have an impact, and that person will have a huge impact. Right now, as you say, these are all creatures of the political system, these candidates, all good candidates and quality creatures of the political system, but they're creatures of the political system. If somebody drops into this race with a big checkbook and wants to say, I'm not status quo, I can do things differently, I just moved to this city, I chose to live in this city, and I know we can do things better than we've been doing them, that's going to be a good message. That's going to be a tough message. Boston historically has not gone for that.
I was just going to say that.
Right.
And some would say, and throw this into that kind of elixir there that you're stirring up, we've come off, we're just coming out of a mayor who's done all the right things.
Right.
So is that only in kind of a crisis situation that?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, Boston historically hasn't fallen for that. You know, we haven't fallen for the outsider with the money who's going to change the world. It's, you know, Boston's a little more conservative in its approach to whom it elects. But this is not the Boston of 20 years ago. This isn't even the Boston of 10 years ago. This is a we're one of the youngest countries, youngest cities, I'm sorry, in the country. These young people, they think very differently. There may be a rejection or a repudiation of the status quo. Again, not of Mayor Menino's performance,
right,
but just of generations.
Just wanting something different.
Something different, something younger, something that's going to shake things up, something that's going to change the faces and names of the power brokers in the city. That could happen. That could be what people want.
And change that's, you know, more dramatic than we're accustomed to.
Yes, absolutely. We're not a big change city. We never
that's
have
what I'm
been.
saying.
Yeah, no, we
you
never
know.
have been. But again, you know, we've never been the city we are right now. I mean, I talk to young people all the time. You know, they get their news differently. They think differently. They talk differently. You know, they look at elected officials perhaps who have been around a long time, and they don't necessarily see that as a plus. They don't necessarily recognize experience in public office as a plus. I do. I think it happens to be important. Yeah. But some of the younger people don't see that as terribly important.
Now, we've got just a couple minutes left. Any of these candidates that have been mentioned, and not to put any over the others, but to have a bit of a leg up, you know, for example, and can't go through them all, but like talking about money, you're looking at the you know, the war chests of these candidates. Danny Conley,
Danny Conley, I mean,
Suffolk DA, he's got over $750,000 that he's, you know, over the years he's saved up in his camp. Help him, put him in a better position.
I think today, as we sit here today, sure, absolutely. It always helps to have more money than the other guys, no question about it. And he also has some name recognition from having served as DA and the media exposure that goes with that. So yeah, that's something you can't look the other way on. I think there's a lot of money yet to be raised in this race by the other candidates. So, you know, I think that will eventually tend to even itself off. But coming out of the box, you know, a guy like Dan Conley with that kind of money can define himself and get up with some messages on air or in advertising.
Early, if he wants.
Early. And you know,
and no, I should say, no indication from Conley that he's running per se. But
I don't know that he's running.
Now, and we've got just a minute or so left because this thing, this is the battle royale, and it's a big crown, and a lot of people want it. But this will reverberate down. I mean, any city council that runs will have to give up their seat. You know, state reps, state senators, were they to win, you know, just kind of all the way down. So the change that's coming isn't just at the top. We're going to be seeing.
It's going to be a seismic shift in the political landscape. You know something? It's not just the political landscape. It's the development landscape. You know, there will likely be a different approach to development in the city of Boston by a new administration. There'll at least be a pause in development while the new administration gets its bearings on development. All new faces in the city council. You've got special elections going on.
Come right now. We're
state senator for United States Senate. Domino effect from that with new state reps, new state senators backfilling these positions. We're going to be sitting here a year from today, and we're going to be talking about. We're going to need a program to know what.
But we'll be talking about the governor's race,
and the governor's race,
and all the constitutional officers. Right. So much is changing so fast. That
well, you know, for guys like us, it's great. You know,
it's wonderful, and you know, we're going to help all of you keep track of it. In the coming weeks and months ahead, well, we'll be covering not just the mayor's race, council races, and all special elections. And John, I hope you'll come back at some point and talk some more.
Happy to do it.
Perhaps no one in the city of Boston has more institutional knowledge of all these races over the years. Been there, done that. I appreciate you coming by tonight, and thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Joe. I'll be back.
All right. You're watching Talking the Neighborhoods. We're here tonight and every Monday night. The same time, we'll be back next week joining us, talking about the special elections coming up on April 30th, I believe it is. Of course, that's the U.S. Senate primary, and also in Boston here, the first Suffolk Senate race. Joining us, Maureen Dayhill, one of the candidates, the Democratic candidates in that race, will be a joining us. Till then, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN, I want to thank you for watching Talk in the Neighborhoods. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.